Ladies and gentlemen, one of the ways America will ultimately implode is because this society, everything is overpriced. They have overpriced the homes, the food, the clothing, everything is overpriced. See, they got this policy of raising prices every single year on everything. And because of that, they are now unable to support this society as the future comes. Remember, you're going to have less people here when the baby boomers die out. And you bringing immigrants across the southern border, those people can't afford the kind of houses that you got across America. That's not the answer. And that's how this place is going to implode financially. They done hiked the prices up to the point when the baby boomers all die out and it's a much smaller population, they're not going to be able to maintain this. But, ladies and gentlemen, you can't reason with an animal. You can't. Because all they see is dollar signs. So when you try to explain this to them, you're not going to be able to sustain this kind of society with all these overpriced things out here. They can't comprehend that or see it. So it's like talking to a wall. But ultimately, when we get to that point, when the baby boomers are no longer here to support the economy, it's going to crumble fast with a lot less people. And they're steady hiking the prices up on everything. The problem is they have overvalued everything out here. And yes, your homeless people, a lot of them are drug addicts. Many of them are really, truly mentally ill. This is real, true mental illness, not this commit a crime and you're now in trouble with the law and you're mentally ill all of a sudden. No, that's not mental illness. This is really mental illness. Many of these homeless people out on the street, and they're not mass shooting anybody. Ladies and gentlemen, America will implode, and this is one of the ways it will implode. And plus, you have a lot of millennials that are not working because they're claiming they are too emotional and mentally stressed and can't work. So you got a huge population of young people that aren't even out here working. Go read some of the articles, okay? And see, every time you try to explain these things, they just can't grasp it. They don't get it. But they're going to have to face reality. They're going to have to do it. And by the time they realize they got a problem, it's going to be too late, just like the opioids. When that addiction started 20 years ago, they weren't doing anything. They weren't saying very much about it and they weren't doing anything. Now it's a huge issue and it's public health and nobody needs to go to jail and these people need help. But in the meantime, they're saying all these things and the addiction is just exploding. They waited too late to get off their asses and do something about it. Now it done spiraled out of control. You got millions out here that are strung out. How do you control that? And then you already said you're not putting them in jail. You're not gonna you're not gonna do anything, but you're throwing all this money. It's already been well over $1 trillion spent on this addiction, and they're not even making any kind of headways. Well, it's going to be the same thing when it comes down to homelessness in America. And it spiraled out of control. Yes, some of these people do have all kinds of problems, but what you also did was price them out of housing. Some of them, once upon a time, could afford housing, but they can't anymore. And that's going to become a growing problem in America. So this came out on NPR December 13th, 2019. How Boise's fight over homelessness is rippling across the West Coast. And this is not just a West Coast problem. This problem is going on nationwide. And I think because there are so many people on Skid Row now, it's to the point where they can't ignore it. They can't ignore this anymore. And then you have hepatitis A, and all kinds of diseases that are cropping up from this. Believe it or not, homelessness is not a hard thing to fix. But these folks in America put greed over everything, including human life. And those kind of attitudes, it's just not going to work leading into the future. There's only so many things you can ignore. So I'm going to go ahead and play this audio for you from NPR.
Support for NPR and the following message come from WAPA, proudly providing 44,000 civilian federal employees competitively priced life insurance and more. Information at waepa.org. More than 500,000 people in this country do not have homes. It's a crisis.
Okay, it's buffering some. Okay, well, it seems to be
Especially
buffering.
clearly
Oh, here we
along the
go.
West Coast. There are tent cities along sidewalks, parks, and highway underpasses, and they are at the center of a huge legal fight. A federal appeals court has put limits on how far cities can go to enforce bans on camping. As NPR's Leila Fadel and Kirk Siegler report, this case could be headed to the Supreme Court.
Boise, Idaho is maybe an unusual place to start this story. The homeless crisis is overwhelming the big cities on the West Coast, while Boise bills itself as one of the country's most livable cities, touting its good schools, its safe, leafy neighborhoods, and access to the outdoors. Yet it's this prosperous, mid-sized city that's at the center of a divisive legal battle over whether people can sleep on public property. The case goes back nearly a decade to when Pam Hawks and her then partner were homeless here. She says many nights they had no other choice but to pitch a tent in a wooded area along the Boise River.
I was like, I just need somewhere to lay my head overnight. And it's not like we left camp. We always packed up and we always kept it clean.
Yet, police routinely ticketed her for camping in public. I reached Hawks in Spokane, Washington, where she's since moved. She was on a city bus on her way to a job interview.
It's kind of frustrating when they call it camping in public tickets, which then I feel it makes me seem like I'm right smack downtown. But in all reality, I was tried my best at the time to stay out of view of the public eye.
Hawks and a half dozen others in a similar predicament sued the city of Boise, and last year they won. A federal appeals court ruled it's unconstitutional for cities to ticket people for sleeping in public if there are no shelter beds available. This is now the law of the Ninth Circuit that covers much of the West. Boise is appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court. But for now, from here to Seattle to cities in California, you can't just criminalize people like Hawks for not having anywhere to sleep.
You got one on the 24th. You got one on the 25th.
Boise
You got
civil
one
rights
August
attorney Howard
19th.
Belodoff still keeps copies of the dozen public camping tickets Pam Hawks got. She couldn't pay them, so she'd spend the night in jail. Belodoff represents the plaintiffs.
The only way to deter a homeless person is to give him a place to live. That's the underlying problem.
Even though the homeless population in Boise is much smaller than in big cities, the underlying tensions are the same. The cost of living here is soaring. Boise is now one of the nation's fastest growing cities, and there's an extraordinary affordable housing crisis. Homelessness was a deciding factor in an unusually heated mayoral race here this fall that ended up bitterly dividing two Democrats. The message that won was Lauren McLean's.
The part that is missed all too often is the importance of prevention. If we want to prevent camps, we have to prevent homelessness. We've got to address the affordability crisis in this community.
The losing candidate was the city's longest ever serving mayor, Dave Beater. He took heat for spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to appeal the case. But Beater argues Boise needs the ability to issue some tickets to stop the spread of encampments that he said have taken over West Coast cities like Seattle and Los Angeles, where my colleague Layla Falden is.
Here on Skid Row in downtown LA, some 3,000 people sleep on the streets every night in the shadow of the financial district and luxury condos. Tents and makeshift homes made with tarps and cardboard line the streets. People camping on the sidewalks are shoving their belongings into plastic bags, shopping carts, backpacks, or roller bags, pushing them out of the way before sanitation workers get to their block to fill garbage trucks and power wash the sidewalks. It's a city program to keep areas with homeless encampments like Skid Row, often referred to as the homeless capital of the nation, clean.
Just another ploy to harass the homeless, making us move when we don't supposed to.
That's Juan Brown. He looks on, shaking his head. He's standing on the corner where he slept for 3 years before getting into housing last month. He got hit by a car, couldn't work, and so like 150 people every single day in Los Angeles County, he fell into homelessness.
We're targeted because Los Angeles look at us like cockroaches instead of human beings. We're no longer human beings out here no more. Homeless people are cockroaches to society now.
There need to be rules on the streets.
That's LA City Attorney Mike Fewer. He says he's against criminalizing homelessness, but the Boise ruling is too broad. LA and dozens of other municipalities filed supporting briefs in the Boise case.
I want the Supreme Court to issue clear rules that lead there to be certainty in jurisdictions like ours as to how we can regulate constitutionally conduct on our sidewalks.
For example, he worries, will the city be burdened with nightly counts of the number of homeless people versus available shelter beds? He says the city has to balance the rights of homeless people with those of business owners and other residents. They complain about the growing number of tent cities, garbage, human feces, and used needles. He says cities and states are working to build more shelters and affordable housing. But as that work is done, Los Angeles has to be able to police the streets.
So that all our public spaces that are shared by everybody can be safe for everybody. And occasionally that is going to require some level of enforcement.
And he has questions about how LA can do that under this ruling. The crisis is visible outside Fewer's downtown office and back on Skid Row, where I meet General Dogon.
Conditions on Skid Row are worse than third world country refugee camps.
Dogon works with a local nonprofit called the Los Angeles Community Action Network. He says for years he's watched the city follow the same pattern, one ordinance after the next aimed at criminalizing being homeless instead of completing badly needed housing projects. The courts, tickets, confiscation of property are not solutions, he says, to stop the growing crisis.
I tell people all the time, everybody ain't on drugs and everybody ain't lost their mind. 71% of the people is homeless in the city of Los Angeles because the rent is too damn high. That's it and that's all.
That's according to the latest county homelessness count. The numbers are up for debate, and so is how to solve the problem. In the last year, homelessness jumped 16% in this city, and whatever the Supreme Court decides to do won't change that reality.
That was NPR's Leila Fadel reporting from Los Angeles and NPR's Kirk Siegler in Boise. The Supreme Court could decide whether it will take up the Boise case as early as today.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and they're right.
And now more from NPR.
And they're right. You've priced these people out and made housing so unaffordable. Many of them are on the streets now.
Live from NPR News.
But you can't, like I said, you can't reason with these people. You can't reason with them on so many levels. It's not even funny. So, hey, keep dealing with this problem and keep hiking up your prices for things that are not even worth it, not even worth the value that you put on it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a growing problem. Even around where I am, I see more homeless people today than I did when I was growing up. I thought I saw a lot of them growing up. There are a lot of them out here. And this is a problem that America could have resolved a long time ago, because people are more concerned about their wallets than what's going on out here in the streets. That's why it's never been resolved all this time. And you wonder, what are these politicians doing? What are they doing? I mean, this has been an issue for decades, but they would rather just sit there, claim they're for the people. But ultimately, when you see something like this, they're not for the people at all. They're not. And it's another reason not to like politicians. But please tell me what you think about this story, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.